Hey guys, Noah here with Handy. Today we are going to be going over the Handy PITBUL and how to put one together. So when you get your PITBUL to your door, it is going to look like this. 3 separate boxes. First thing you're going to want to do is open up each box and get a feel for where all of your individual parts are at. So once everything's laid out, be sure to go through your parts list on page 4 and 5. Make sure that you have everything. I'm going to be walking you through step by step in the assembly instructions on how to do this. So let's jump right into step 1. So step 1 is going to involve strut E, strut F, and strut D. What you're going to want to do is line strut E and strut F up together with these small 3/8 corresponding holes. Butt those up together. You're then going to take 2 parts of strut D, line those up with the corresponding holes. You'll then take 2 of bolt O and put those in on this chamfered side. Make sure that both chamfered sides of the struts are pointing out. You'll also notice that the engraving E and the engraving F are both pointing out. You're going to want to put these bolts just on the outside holes for now. And then we'll have nut NN. Put that on the back side. Do not tighten this up yet. It's best to leave everything loose for now up until we get to step 7 or 8. Just makes everything easier to put together. You are going to have your riser block H with your foot pad G. For each of these, you are going to need quantity 2 of bolt L with a 7/32 Allen. You're going to want to Loctite both of these bolts as you put them in. These feet are countersunk, so there's only one way to put these bolts into the feet. And these you can cinch down. Once these are in, they are not going anywhere. You are good. Moving on to step 3. You are going to take 4 of the strut assemblies that we previously made in step 1, and we're going to be putting the remaining 4 bolts and 4 nuts in these struts and tightening them down. Make sure that you're on a square surface when you do this, and as you tighten the bolt and nut, make sure that all of these struts are staying square to each other. Once you have all of your bolts and nuts on, you're going to get a 5/16 Allen and a 9/16 socket, and you're going to tighten those up. Again, making sure that they are square. We do not recommend power tools on these. These are nylon nuts. We have seen them tear out before, so we definitely recommend hand tools. For step 4, we are going to take 2 of our fully tightened strut assemblies that we did in the previous step, our foot assembly that we did in step 2. You're going to take your 3/4 inch pivot pin, which is labeled GG, and your 3/4 inch plastic washer, which is labeled HH. You want to make sure that you are dealing with the squared side of the strut assembly. You'll know that it's right if you're dealing with the E. You're going to take your pivot pin, run it through the larger diameter hole of the strut assembly, put on your plastic washer, run it through the foot assembly, put on another plastic washer, then your corresponding side. Make sure that both strut assemblies have the chamfered edge facing out. Once that's on, you're going to take 2 more plastic washers, HH, and put them on either side. We're going to do this twice. So this is the start of our lower leg assembly. Step 5. We're going to move on to the other end of this lower leg assembly. It'll be a rounded end, and you will see an F here. You're going to have 4 plastic washers again, HH, and 1 3/4 inch pivot pin, GG, and 2 of your 2x6 rubber wheels labeled BB. You're going to run your pivot pin through the hole of the strut, put on your plastic washer, then your first wheel, and right next to it, your second wheel. Once the pivot pin makes it through that second wheel, you're going to put on 1 more plastic washer, and then put on the strut. Once all that's on, take the remaining plastic washers, put them on either end of that pivot pin. So that concludes your lower leg assembly. Again, we're doing this twice. Once step 5 is done, you will have 2 of these that are identical to one another. Moving on to step 6, you're going to have your handy brace plate, which is labeled C, and your inside vertical strut, which is labeled B. What we're going to be doing is attaching B to C using bolt K, which is a 1/4-20 flathead. On these, orientation is critical. So what we're going to do is make sure that you can read the word handy. We're going to have that facing up. You're going to take strut B, and we're going to be sitting like that, with your countersunk holes out and towards the top, just like that. Again, on this one, we are not wanting to use any power tools. Hand tighten these to start, then use either a wrench or ratchet to get them fully tightened. Once you do have them all started, you can fully tighten. Once you have step 6 completed, this is what it should look like. You've got your handy, you can read it. It's going to sit like that with all of your holes on the upside, your countersinks all facing out, your chamfers all facing out on both sides. We are going to repeat this step another time and end up with quantity 2. For step number 7, you are going to take your handy brace plate assembly, which is labeled EE, one of your aluminum end caps, which is labeled P, and one of your 3/8 flathead bolts, which is labeled P. You're going to need a 7/32 Allen for this step. What we're going to do is we're going to be working on the foot end of our lower leg assembly. We're going to take our brace plate, make sure that the handy name is upright and facing out, away from the strut assembly. So if we lay that there, it'll move like that with the handy name up and outright. You're going to take your handy brace plate and slip it on to the pivot pin of the lower leg assembly. Take your Loctited bolt and your aluminum end cap, and we are going to thread that all the way in to the pivot shaft of the lower leg assembly. For step number 8, we have brought up our second lower leg assembly, our second handy brace plate assembly, labeled EE, and 3 of each of our 3/8 flathead bolts, which is labeled L, and our aluminum end cap, which is labeled P. All we're doing here is repeating the previous step on the inside of all of the lower leg assemblies. Make sure that your other handy brace plate is oriented the same way as the opposite one, with the name handy up and facing out. We're going to slip the brace plate onto the pivot shaft of the lower leg assembly. And cinch that up with your 7/32 Allen. Cinch it up as good as you can. Obviously, there's nothing on the backside to hold it yet, so it's going to want to turn. Just cinch it up as good as you can. Again, make sure that these bolts are Loctited before you put them on. Once they're on, they're not going anywhere. We're going to repeat that step for the opposite side. Putting on our aluminum end cap and bolt. We are going to repeat that step for the opposite side. Again, make sure that your handy brace plate is oriented correctly with the name handy up and out. And you have your aluminum end cap and your bolt on the inside of either end of the brace plate into the pivot shafts of the lower leg assembly. Moving on to step number 9. We are then going to take part R, which is our top bent brace, making sure that the outside face of R is facing out, with the outside face of the strut hitting the inside face of R. Again, making sure that our chamfers are facing out. We are then going to run our 4 remaining bolts through part R, through the strut assembly. And then we'll put our nut and end on the back side. We're then going to repeat this for the corresponding side, making sure that our strut assemblies are oriented correctly with both round ends here, both squared ends here. And again, making sure that the outside face of part R is facing out. Now that everything is put together, it is time to fully tighten these down. Again, we're not wanting to use power tools on here, and making sure that everything is sitting square as we tighten it up. We'll need our 5/16 Allen and our 9/16 socket or wrench, whatever you got. Once you have this assembly fully tightened and oriented correctly, we are going to repeat this step. Again, we are making sure that our rounded edges are on the same side and our squared edges are on the same side with our chamfers pointing out. For step number 10, we are going to be fully completing our upper leg assembly. This is going to involve our riser block labeled I, engraved on that face there. Another 3/4 inch pivot pin labeled GG. 4 plastic 3/4 inch washers labeled HH. On this side, the rounded side, you're going to have your hex block labeled Q. Another pivot pin. 4 more plastic washers. Starting with the riser block here. Take your pivot pin, run it through your strut, plastic washer, slip in your riser block, and run your pivot pin all the way through the riser block. You then spread that out a little bit. Put on another plastic washer. And then through the end of the other corresponding strut. You have 2 more plastic washers. Put those on either end. Make sure that your riser block is facing up, setting on that flat surface of the struts. We're going to repeat this step on the rounded side, but instead of the riser block, we will have our hex spacer. Pivot pin, plastic washer, put on your hex spacer, run that pivot pin through, put on another plastic washer, and run it through the opposite strut. Again, 2 plastic washers go on either end. And that there is your upper leg assembly. Repeat this step until we have quantity 2 of these. And we are putting this lift together. Step number 11. We're going to have 1 upper leg assembly, 2 of our struts labeled A. It's engraved right there. 2 end caps and 2 bolts. We are going to be putting on strut A, which is an outside vertical strut. When you put this on, you want to make sure that your chamfers are facing away from the lift, and you will have these 3 3/8 clearance holes. You want to make sure that when you're setting that here, your 3 holes are farther away from the ground. Do the same thing on the opposite side. Chamfers facing out, oriented with the chamfers on the lower leg assembly, with your 3 3/8 holes up and away from the ground. Once you do that, take your 3/8 bolt and your aluminum end cap, thread it into your pivot pin, and cinch everything up. For step number 12, we will be repeating step 11, just opposite. So what we're going to do is take our second assembled upper leg assembly with 2 more outside vertical struts labeled A. You'll notice that the ones I have already on are facing out that way. We want these facing the exact opposite. So you have your chamfers of your lift, or your upper leg assembly rather, facing out. You want to align the chamfer of vertical strut A with the upper leg assembly. The chamfers of this strut are facing back. Chamfers of this strut are facing out, making sure that your 3/8 clearance holes are away from the ground and lining up with one another. We're going to do the same exact thing on the opposite side. Once all of our struts are oriented correctly, 3/8 bolt, aluminum end cap, making sure to lock tight, and we'll be cinching all these up. So once you complete step 12, always be sure to double check the orientation of all your holes. We're making sure that our chamfers of our vertical struts are facing out and opposite of each other, with our 3/8 clearance holes facing towards the sky, farther away from the lift or the ground, whatever you're working on. You're making sure the same is true for all 4 of your A labeled vertical struts. Once step 12 is completed, we are going to get our bottom base of the lift. If you are working on a table or on a handy lift or something like that, and you're getting this back up on top, you're for sure going to want a friend. Trying to lift this thing up by yourself is not going to be doable. It's going to fall apart on you. So invite a buddy over, buy him a beer, ask for some help, and get this thing back on the lift. Continuing on step number 13, once you have your upper leg mounts on, you want to make sure that they're oriented in such a way that the hex pins are on the same side as the feet and the riser blocks are on the same side as the wheels. Once that is complete and we have our outside vertical struts cinched up top and bottom, we're going to move on to the inside. Now, this is where we have our handy brace plate. Remember earlier, we made sure that that thing was oriented correctly with the word handy up and out. So what we're going to do is we're going to cinch that onto the inside of our upper leg assemblies, making sure the entire time that your plastic washers are staying on. Once that is on there, again, 3/8 bolt, lock tight, aluminum end cap, but a good rule of thumb when putting these struts together, as soon as I get a strut put onto a pivot pin or wherever it's going, the very first thing I'm doing is putting that bolt and that aluminum end cap on. That way, there's no way that it can go anywhere. We are going to do the same thing for the opposite side. Again, making sure that our hex pins are on the same side as our feet. Again, riser blocks on the same side as your wheels. Making sure that my plastic washers stay on the whole time. Do not want to lose those. Loctiting our bolt and aluminum end cap. Once that is all done, all of your vertical struts are placed as they should be, oriented as they should be, with your bolts and end caps on. Do not fully tighten those bolts and end caps yet. It is going to be a lot easier to get our cylinders into the lift without tightening those first. We will wait on that, but that is step number 14, and we will move on to step number 15. For step number 15, we are going to be putting on our vertical strut braces. You are going to have 3 different kinds of vertical strut braces. One will be the PITBUL logo with your serial number. One will be the Handy logo. And the third, and you'll have 2 of these, will say Made in the USA. We are made in the USA. Everything is done right here in Sully, Iowa, from front to back. It's all done in our shop. So what we're going to do, each side will have a Made in USA vertical strut brace, and then either your PITBUL or Handy. So Made in USA on one side, PITBUL, Made in USA, Handy on the other. Doesn't really matter. It's up to you, however you want to orient those. Just make sure that they all go on. So those are going to slip on right over top of your vertical strut braces. Remember when we oriented our 3 3/8 clearance holes on our upper leg assembly, that's where those are going to go. Then we will use nut N and bolt N to cinch all these up. Again, on these, we are not wanting to use power tools. Can I come around here? Is that cool if I walk on it? On these, we want our socket heads facing the outside with our nuts on the inside of the vertical strut brace. Again, tightening these up by hand, no power tools. For step number 16, we are going to grab our 2-inch by 24-inch hydraulic cylinder, and we are going to remove the 2 plugs here. You're going to need a 1/4-inch Allen to do that. For step number 17, we're going to take our 2 by 24 hydraulic cylinder, and what we're going to do is we're going to pull that shaft out about 2 inches. This just allows for better fitment once we get it into the lift. When you do pop it out, there is going to be a little bit of factory fluid in that cylinder, so don't yank on it too hard or it's going to throw that fluid everywhere. It's not a true 2 inches, and once you do pull it out, it is still going to be slightly adjustable, so don't worry about getting a tape measure or anything like that out. For step number 18, we are going to be putting our pivot shafts into our cylinder before we drop those into the lift. So we're going to have spacer U, spacer V, pivot shaft X, and then we will have our 90-degree elbow, which is FF. I like to put my 90-degree elbows on first, and what we're wanting to do is orient those facing down, so towards the bottom of the cylinder, which is this one here. It's your set pivot point. Once those are set where you want them, tighten up that set screw so they don't go anywhere. Now that those are in, we're moving on to our pivot shafts. There is going to be a touch of grease in these pivot points from the factory, so there's no need to grease it until it is in the lift. You're going to put your pivot shaft in and put your spacers on either side. For your spacers, on the top of the hydraulic cylinder, you will have spacer V. On the bottom of the hydraulic cylinder, you will have spacer U. Now that we have our pivot shafts installed into our cylinders, we're going to put the cylinder itself into the lift. Making sure the lift is oriented as such. Hole here and hole here. Drop the cylinder down through your top and bottom leg assemblies. This here You might have to play with that top shaft a little bit just to find the proper length to get it lined up. And once you adjust it that first time, it adjusts pretty easy from then on out. Again, we want to make sure that the top pivot point of the cylinder is on the upper leg and the bottom pivot point is on the lower leg, with your 90-degree elbows pointing towards the bottom of the cylinder. Use your 3/4 inch hex nuts labeled M to cinch everything up. So now that we have the cylinders in, you can see the orientation. You have the top of your cylinder here. You know, obviously, once fluid is pushed to that cylinder, it's going to allow the lift to come up. Bottom of your cylinder here, making sure that your holes are oriented properly. You're going to be able to tell fairly quickly if you go to put your cylinder in and your holes are on the wrong side. So here and here, with your 90-degree elbows pointed down. Now that your cylinders are in and everything is where it's supposed to be, you can tighten everything up. What I like to do is just start from front to back, making sure every single nut and bolt is tight, making sure everything has been Loctited, making sure I didn't miss any nuts or bolts anywhere. So, you know, looking at all your pivot pin bolts, your hydro pivot bolts, all of your socket head bolts holding your struts together, just making sure everything is tightened up before we put our hoses on. Now that your lift is all together, it is time to start routing your hydraulic hoses. So you're going to have two 18-inch hoses, one female JIC end, one male NPT end on both of those. And you will have two 46-inch hoses, one female JIC end, one male NPT end. Starting with our 18-inch hose, that is going to go at the bottom of the cylinder. And you thread that onto your 90-degree elbow. Same thing with your 46-inch hose. That's going to go to the top of the cylinder. You definitely want to run that underneath this brace here. If you don't, the instant you try to put that lift up, it's going to catch this hose and it's going to get messy. So we're running that under this horizontal brace right next to our 18-inch hose and putting that onto the 90-degree elbow. Same with the opposite side. Once you have your four hoses on your cylinders, we're going to want to plumb those together using the provided T-fittings. Once those are on, we'll be using our quick connects. So come down here. We'll start with our 18-inch hoses. You have your male NPT end. Be sure to use some sort of thread dope on this. We like Loctite 567. Any thread dope will do, or pipe dope rather. And then make sure that you then attach it to the opposite 18-inch hose. So now both of those 18-inch hoses are coming down into one T. You're then going to do the same thing with the 46-inch hoses. Again, for male NPT end, pipe dope, Loctite 567 is what we like. Whatever you got in your shop will work. Thread it into the opposite 46-inch hose. There you have your T's. Moving on to the final step of the hydraulic plumbing, you're going to have one male and one female quick connect. Those are going to go on your T's at the bottom of the cylinders. The reason these are opposite is to ensure that you cannot plumb the lift backwards. Once hooked up to the power unit, it is up to you how you want to plumb it, but we offer enough fittings that way only one hose works on your bottom, one hose works on your top. Now, remember, we are still putting pipe dope on these, Loctite 567, or whatever you got in your shop. Once all of your hydraulic components are together, first thing you're going to want to do is grease those pivot points. You're going to have a grease zerk at the top and at the bottom of each cylinder. Give it 1 or 2 pumps from your grease gun, and that'll be good. You're going to want to zip tie your hoses to your cylinder just to ensure that there's zero movement as this lift is going up and down, taking away any risk of pinching a hose or getting anything in the way. There is no need to zip tie that 18-inch hose as it points far enough down. I like to zip tie the 46-inch hose to the outside of the 18-inch elbow. Now that your lift is completely together, you can plumb that thing up, get a battery, get power to it, and send it up in the air. Once you do that, you'll be able to install your adjustable riser block. This comes with the riser block itself, the detent pin, and the removable pin. To remove the pin, pull the detent pin, give it a quarter turn, and pop that riser block out. Once that lift is up, you'll be able to throw that removable pin in any one of these given holes. I want to thank you guys for watching. Thank you for being part of the Handy family. We look forward to hearing back from you. Be sure to send us your photos and videos, whether it's in the shop, in the pits, at the races. Visit our website at handyindustries.com or give us a follow on Instagram or Facebook. Thanks, guys.